Welcome everybody to the latest in our series of OIE meetups. Today's session is going to be focusing primarily on the Desktop SSO / IWA routing rule upgrade blocker. So we're going to talk about what that blocker is, how to mitigate it, and go through some tips on migrating away from the sort of legacy desktop IWA or the on-prem desktop IWA to the newer way of doing things to keep that same functionality. I am joined, as always, by my partner in crime, Dimitri, from our product marketing team. And I am Brent Arrington. I'm part of our product acceleration team. Dimitri and I will be walking you through today's session, talking about the IWA setting blocker, as well as going over some general information about how to upgrade to OIE and OIE in general. Dimitri, I will hand it over you to kind of kick us off and do a brief intro before we dive into today's session.
Okay. Yeah, so do you want me to go through the upgrade reminder, or do we go directly into the IWA session? Oh, no, just the agenda. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm resynchronizing right now. So, safe harbor. Yeah, obviously, we might make some forward-looking statement during this presentation. So this is done under the umbrella provision of the safe harbor. And yes, so now that I know what I'm doing, the agenda is pretty straightforward. I think Brent kind of highlighted it. So we're going to be looking at Desktop SSO and IWA first. I think Brent will provide explain you why this blocker might happen and what is the remediation possible or mitigation. And we'll also open it for the floor for any of your Q&A. This is really the main part of the webinar here, the meetup. We want to discuss this topic. If we have time after that, I will come back and I will walk you through a quick how to upgrade a reminder, which we have done that in a previous session of the meetup. So if you've been to this meetup before, you want to learn much more. So without further ado, and we'll cover resources at the end. So without further ado, let's get into the topic of the day, and back to you, Brent.
All right. Thanks, Dimitri. So as we noted, the main topic for today is going to be upgrading to OIE when you have the legacy desktop SSO IWA functionality enabled. We do have actually some very good documentation around this that you would see actually in your tenant in the self-service upgrade section in your dashboard under the Learn More link. We've also got a QR code here linked to that knowledge base article that walks you through step by step. Actually has a couple of videos that walk you through step by step how to migrate from the legacy IWA to the new agentless desktop SSO that is fully supported in OIE. Sorry, I've got a little bit of a lawn care issue going on outside. Bad timing. So I'm not going to go through the step-by-step process of integrating the agentless IWA. That's covered in pretty good detail by the video that's on this this knowledge base article. I would just direct you to that. What we are going to go through today are just some kind of general tips and guidelines around the whole process that you want to follow when moving away from the on-prem IWA to the agentless desktop SSO in preparation for the upgrade to OIE. Before I do dive in, I do want to call out one thing. We do have in the Zoom webinar, there is a Q&A option available to you. So as we're going through the content today, please, if you have questions, add those to the Q&A. And we should have plenty of time at the end of the presentation to cover all of those questions live here during the setting, or during the session. But as you have questions, if you just go ahead and add those there, we can get those queued up and ready to address. All right, so the first thing I guess to note is that as far as OIE is concerned, at least in terms of your eligibility to upgrade to OIE, really the only thing that matters is the routing rule. That is the thing that blocks you from upgrading to OIE. You could have All of your IWA agents on-prem, like the IWA servers on-prem, they could be completely uninstalled and removed. You could have them disconnected from your org. But if you have that routing rule there, even if it's still inactive, if that routing rule is still present, that will trigger this eligibility item, and that will stop you from upgrading. So at the end of the day, we're just the resolution to this blocker is very simple. It's just delete the routing rule. But before we get to that, there are some considerations that you want to keep in mind. So for the IWA functionality, the IWA servers, and like all of that's like all that mechanism within your Okta tenant, there are actually two purposes that it can serve. The primary one is the authentication flow. So this would be your desktop SSO authentication flow, where users get a passwordless sign-in experience when they're on network and they're on a domain join machine. They're just automatically authenticated via Kerberos, and they get right in without getting prompted. So that's obviously the primary use case. There is, however, a secondary use case where you may not necessarily be using IWA for authentication, but you may have the servers in place locally to manage desktop device trust, to issue the certs for the Windows-based desktop device trust. If you are using the authentication functionality of the IWA servers, then before you take the steps to delete that routing rule, you're going to want to make sure that you migrate to agentless desktop single sign-on so that you can keep that same functionality. And we'll talk about how that works. If you're not using the authentication flow, and you're only the only reason that you have those IWA servers in place is to manage your desktop device trust for Windows machines, then if you do have the routing rule still present, it's perfectly fine to just go ahead and remove that routing rule. It's not going to impact the cert functionality at all. As long as you leave those IWA agents in place, they will continue to function in that capacity with or without the routing rule. And just as a side note, if you are using the desktop device trust through the IWA servers, you do want to leave those servers in place through the upgrade, because those managed devices for the desktop device trust can persist through the upgrade. And then after you upgrade, you can more seamlessly migrate to the new OIE way of managing device trust. But you would be able to kind of keep that functionality in place through the upgrade by leaving those IWA servers in place. So assuming that you are using the authentication functionality for desktop single sign-on, you're going to want to make sure that to keep that functionality, you migrate to our newer way of doing things, which is the agentless desktop single sign-on. As I mentioned earlier, there is a very good video that is in the knowledge base article that would be linked in your OIE upgrade hub in your admin console. That video walks you through in very good detail, step-by-step, exactly how to configure the agentless desktop single sign-on setup. So I'm not going to go into those details today, but I would just direct you to watch that video. It'll kind of guide you every step of the way. I will point out that the good thing about this is that you can enable agentless desktop single sign-on in parallel with your existing on-prem IWA desktop single sign-on. And even better, you can have the agentless, or excuse me, you can have the on-prem, your existing on-prem desktop single sign-on become the first failover when you do enable the agentless. So it really is a very seamless process to roll this out. You don't have to turn off or turn down your existing IWA flow to start this process. You can just configure agentless, have it set to fail over to your on-prem IWA that's already there and working. And as you roll this out, if there are any misconfigurations anywhere, it would just fail over to your existing one, and you can troubleshoot accordingly. Your end users would not really see any big difference there if they did have a failure on the agentless when they fail over, other than maybe an extra flash or two in the browser as they're going through that flow. So the process should be fairly seamless to get that enabled. Once you do have the agentless desktop single sign-on enabled, you're going to want to monitor your system log for authentication events, and you can distinguish between authentication events that are happening via the agentless desktop single sign-on and via the on-prem DSSO. And when you get to a point where you're seeing successes happening consistently with the agentless flow and less failures and failing over to the on-prem, or hopefully no failures and failing over to on-prem, at that point you know that it's safe to first deactivate the IWA routing rule that's for the on-prem desktop single sign-on, and then after you've deactivated, you can fully delete that routing rule. Again, until you fully delete the routing rule, you will not be able to clear the blocker. So you have to completely delete the routing rule before it will let you move past that blocker and get to the point where you can schedule your upgrade. Now, if you are only using the IWA servers for the device trust functionality and you're not using the desktop single sign-on functionality, then you don't necessarily have to worry about implementing agentless if you don't need that functionality. You could just move straight forward to deleting the routing rule. So you can tell if this is the case for you in a couple of ways. First off, you can check your routing rule for the on-prem DSSO. If it's already inactive, then that means you're not using it. So you're pretty safe at that point to go ahead and delete that routing rule, because if it's inactive, it's not in use today anyway. Also, if your IWA servers are disconnected from your Okta tenant, so if you go under your delegated auth configurations and you see your IWA servers listed there, but they're highlighted in red and they're not connected, then that is an indication that that flow is not functioning anyway. And so you would then be safe to go ahead and turn that off. And then finally, if you're looking in your system log and you're not seeing any authentication events happening through the on-prem DSSO mechanism, then that's a good indicator that you're not using it. So if you're in this situation, you don't need to do anything to the actual IWA servers that are running locally. You want to leave those as they are in place. You just want to delete the routing rule, and by doing that, that will free you up to move forward with the OIE upgrade. All right. So those are the highlights of the steps you need to take to clear this blocker and move forward with upgrading when you do have the on-prem IWA routing rule in place. I'm going to pause here and check our Q&A, see if we have any questions. So I do see one question here. So applications that are using an embedded browser. I think it just got answered. Did it get answered? Here we go. Yeah, John just answered this one. So let's go through. Actually, I'll go through with some of the questions that were answered in the chat, and we can just kind of call those out here live. So one question was around what IWA stands for. It is Integrated Windows Authentication, as Dimitri noted. Yeah, we have a lot of acronyms that we throw around here, so it is sometimes an alphabet soup, but IWA is the Integrated Windows Authentication. We have a question around an application that uses an embedded browser, typically using Trident. These don't work with agentless DSSO. Are there any recommendations for these embedded browsers? Yeah, unfortunately, if the browser is not supported, or if the browser doesn't support Kerberos authentication, then it's unfortunately it's not going to work, because that is the mechanism that we're using in both scenarios, both for the on-prem as well as the agentless. We have another question. What part of our Okta environment, or within part of our Okta environment, we have a forest of 6 domains. Agentless works for 5 of the 6. What are the common reasons why agentless would not work? So yeah, there could be a number of issues here. It's a little hard to say without looking in detail at the specific domain settings. Yeah, I mean, I guess the best place to start would be just doing a comparison across the various domains between the ones that are working and the ones that are not, and make sure everything is apples to apples. Um, I would also be curious to see if it's not working like across the board for everyone in that domain, or if it's maybe for a certain set of users. Possibly there's an issue with the browser settings getting pushed out, etc. It's a little hard to speculate though, without kind of looking specifically at the exact configurations that you have. And then we have another question: before deleting the routing rule, can you just deactivate it and expect the same outcome? So yes, I generally would recommend to any users, as you're going through this process, if you have your routing rule active and you're actively using it, your first step in this process should be to just deactivate and then monitor. And as you see that things are going well, and you're getting successful authentications through agentless, if that's the path that you're taking, then at that point you're clear to go ahead and fully delete the routing rule. Yeah. Let's see. I think you have another question. Do Macs need to join Active Directory domain for agentless SSO to work? Yes. So this is true for, it doesn't really matter whether it's whether we're talking about Windows machines or Macs. They do have to be domain joined in order for the desktop single sign-on to work. It's all based on the Kerberos ticket that would be generated when you join the domain. Are there any caveats for going to agentless DSSO when Mac laptops are involved? Or Macs are not joined to Active Directory, but logins to laptops are handled by Okta. So yeah, if your Macs are not domain joined, then they would not be able to join to authenticate through the desktop single sign-on flow. There
And I see
are
there's a
other ways
follow-up
that you
to that
can.
one, Brent.
Sorry, go ahead, John.
It looks like Vivek had a follow-up there. I thought maybe we just answer live a little bit. I'm not super familiar with Jamf Connect and Kerberos, but I mean, the Kerberos support you need is going to be with the domain that's integrated to Okta. So
Yeah.
if the machine, even the Mac, is not domain joined to the domain that it's integrated with Okta, I doubt that it's going to work. But I don't want to say for like 100% certainty. I don't know enough about Jamf Connect there, but I don't believe so.
Yeah. And then we have another question around, do we have any plans to join or to integrate with Azure joined computers on the same domain? I am not aware of anything on the roadmap. I don't know, John, if you've heard anything. I'm just,
Yeah,
I think they're
there's
asking about
not.
Azure AD joined.
Yeah, if you're Azure AD joined, not sure that Microsoft, I mean, that's something totally different than our current domain integration, right? There's no AD agent there. So
Right.
for Azure AD joined machines, there's no real ADSSO.
Yeah.
Obviously, our standard answer would be use FastPass instead of ADSSO. It works on any device, anywhere, regardless of domain join status. So
Yeah.
this is kind of a gap that we give you to bridge that. Getting from IWA over to FastPass would be the goal there.
Yeah. Exactly.
Sorry to hijack your meeting for FastPass.
No. That's
shameless plug.
that's what we're here for. It's shameless plugs. Yeah, FastPass is definitely, once you do get to OIE, FastPass is definitely a good alternative to Desktop SSO. It's a flow that's supported for all machines, whether they're domain joined or not. Whatever location they're on, desktop devices, mobile devices. So, not to mention the fact that it's more secure and it's um, actually multi-factor as opposed to just a single factor. So lots of good reasons to move to FastPass once you get to OIE. All right. Any other questions from anyone around IWA, or just general questions around OIE or the OIE upgrade process? right.
I guess we could.
Since we have a lull in the questions, yeah, let's move on to the upgrade
Yeah,
reminder, and then we can, if we have more questions at the end, we can kind of circle back.
Yeah, we can do that, and I would definitely encourage the audience. If any of you in the audience have not yet upgraded on OIE, what's preventing you from doing it at a technical level? Obviously, in this conversation, chime up now, and we'll help you. So let me go through a brief recap on the upgrade process. Now, we have covered this topic plenty of time, and there is actually a dedicated episode to demystifying the upgrade process and steps. So I encourage you to look at this episode if you need to. But let me just give you a very quick recap. So the first thing I always encourage or actually strongly advise, I would say, everybody is look at the OIE fundamentals. There's a few things that have changes in how we define authenticators, authentication method, and factor types. The vocabulary is a little bit different. So make sure that you look into this. The policy framework is one of the most powerful innovation in OIE because it has the ability to give you the possibility, to do app-level policies. So understanding how the global session and the app-level policy works is also very important. And that leads us to what we call assurance model. So one of the big benefits of OIE is that you don't need to define a specific sequence of factors to achieve a certain security outcome. You just define the security outcome. I want any two-factor, and OIE will figure out what prompts can be given to the end user depending on how many authenticators you have enrolled in your system. So this is much more abstract and flexible than it was in the past. And finally, if you worry about the device trust, or if you're using device trust in Okta Classic, definitely look at the device context. It's much more sophisticated. It has a concept of unknown, known, registered, managed devices. So you have kind of a progression. And also Okta Verify and FastPass, when you deploy them, give you some level of information about the device itself that can help you crafting policies, kind of a mini MDM. So you have a lot of flexibility and a lot of choice in managing the devices in OIE. So once you've looked at the fundamentals, next slide. The upgrade process is a self-service, so you should have a banner when you log in as an admin or super admin in your organization. And if you don't have this banner, you can see that on the on the menu on the left pane in the dashboard, you have an OIE upgrade choice that you can click on here. So it is it's an in-app self-service tool. There's two steps. We run eligibility and identify any blockers that you might have. So we discussed IWA this morning. So there's actually two types of things you will see. You will have blockers, so things that will prevent you from upgrading, and those one you have to resolve before you can upgrade. And you also will have what we call consent, which is recommendation if we detect things that might cause problem, but will not block the upgrade. You also need to look at this. And then you just schedule the upgrade, and you give it a 2 hours time frame at a certain time and date, and it usually happens actually just when you schedule it. It takes a few minutes, most of the cases. So that's the self-service upgrade. Now we have also put together a checklist that we recommend you use. And let me just go walk you through quickly. So I talk about OIE fundamentals, and there's plenty of resources. I will touch on that in a second as well. Make a test plan. We've actually developed a template that you can access from this presentation. We will be posting this presentation, and you will be able to access that. The usual, make sure that your preview and production orgs are in sync. We know they always are, but sometimes they are not. And then upgrade your preview org first. Address the blockers, obviously, before upgrading, if there are some. Understand the context, schedule the upgrade. And once the upgrade is completed, familiarize yourself with the changes in the UI. There are a few changes in the admin UI. And again, about the vocabulary, authenticators, authentication methods. Run your test plan, and when everything has gone through well with your preview org, obviously repeat the same thing on your production org. And once you're on OIE, as we said earlier, you can deploy FastPass. So that's the very simple checklist here. So now I'm not going to cover all those points, but these are additional guidance from what we have heard along the process of helping a large number of our customers, more than 8,000 so far, upgrade to OIE. So there are a few changes in the end user experience. So you might want to ping your end users about that. So for instance, the last use MFA factor setting, which is actually pretty convenient, but you can hide other factors in some cases. So review those, and you might want to write a little note for your end users about some of the end user changes. And also, as always, when you have customization, this is where you might run into problems or changes. So look at all these different points. If you have any of those customization, you might want to revisit them and make sure that you've addressed the potential issues they can create. So that's the kind of the how to upgrade in a very summarized version. We do have a bunch of resources. We're going to flip through them rapidly. So the first one is the resource hub. So you have the link here, and you have basically the overview of OIE, links to our knowledge base, the community site, and our YouTube playlist. So it's kind of the central place to go first if you need any information about OIE upgrade. So then the knowledge base, a little more details here, so you can go direct to it, but again, it's linked from the main hub. After the knowledge base, we do have on the next slide the developer hub. So if you have developed your own code instead of using I would say the out of the box widgets, there's a whole set of information there. And finally, there's the community site. And on the community site, what is also important to note is that you have the ability to book office hours. So that they're free. You can just require them, and you come up with your questions, and we'll answer them on a personalized way during those office hours. So that's a recap of the upgrade process and the resources that are available to you. I can see we have a few more questions coming. So Brent, I'm going to give the floor back to you so we can process those, address those questions.
Yeah, thanks, Dimitri. So I think one of the questions you sort of started to touch on, the questions around what behavior changes can be expected as a result of the upgrade. Some of those were called out in I guess one of the previous slides here. There's a specific question around whether all of your tokens for Microsoft's O365 would get reset. No, you should not. There should not be any impact on existing sessions or tokens. Sessions will persist through the upgrade. Now, one thing that you may see is if you have app level MFA policy requirements on any of your app level policies, you may see users get prompted for MFA after the upgrade because there's actually two different cookies between Classic and OIE. The OIE cookie has a good deal more context included in it to kind of help facilitate some of the interaction between the like global session policies and the individual app policy requirements. But when you upgrade, the classic cookie that the user has in the browser will be honored and exchanged for an OIE cookie. But because the user did not go through the authentication flow in an OIE authentication flow, there will be some context missing there initially. So they may get prompted for some of the app level MFA requirements if you have them, but the overall Okta session will persist. So you should not have any issues there. The only exception to that would be if you have an app level policy around O365. There could be some context missing there, and they may get a prompt for MFA in those scenarios. There is also, I think, one of the resources that was called out here was the YouTube playlist. There is a webinar that was actually cited earlier. I think it was here somewhere. There's a link to it from the community site if we don't have it somewhere else here, but and I also threw it in the chat window. But on our YouTube playlist for OIE, there is a webinar that we did a few months back around demystifying the upgrade, which actually walks through an upgrade live during the session. So you get to see all that happen. You see the Oregon Classic, you see the upgrade happen, you see the immediate impact of that for users who had active sessions, users who are logging in for the first time after the upgrade, changes to the admin console, all that good stuff. Next question. So question is, I would love to upgrade today. We would love it too. But the risk, as you showed in current showstoppers, are you're having difficulties testing in preview. So the thing I would call out about testing in preview. So you don't necessarily have to have a one-to-one replication of your production environment in preview. The things that you want to make sure that you do have replicated that you can test and preview are, number one, anything related to your policy structure. So all your sign-in policies, both at the global level and app level, your factor enrollment policies, your recovery policies, et cetera. And then you also would want to test any items that are called out specifically. So for today, if you are one of the people who has the IWA blocker, which I assume most of you are, right? If you register for this webinar, then you would want to probably test that flow in production as you migrate off of it, just to give yourself a little bit more ease of mind there. And if you have any specific custom implementations, like if you have like custom authentication clients, like maybe CLI clients that you're using in your production environment, you'd want to test those. If you have applications that are building their own custom login pages, whether that's through Okta APIs or through embedded widgets or whatever, you'd want to make sure you test those kinds of things. But those are the things you really want to make sure that you test. You don't necessarily have to replicate all of your application integrations, like your SSO integrations. There's really no change to the SSO integrations at all. It's all around the policy structure there. So you could, in theory, even just create a bunch of bookmark apps that you can attach your policies to and use that to test your policy framework in preview, and that will give you a good idea of what to expect in production. Let's see. A question that says, we've turned off SSO, but we have the IWA server still running. I don't know if I missed part of that question. As it relates to the blocker, turning off the Desktop SSO functionality, like under delegated auth, would not clear the blocker, nor would disconnecting the IWA server. It's the blocker for upgrade is all keyed on the routing rule. So that would, like, deleting the routing rule is the way to clear the blocker. Turning off that functionality under delegated auth or having your servers even completely uninstalled would not have any impact on that routing rule. Let's see. When we upgraded, our agentless Desktop SSO was no longer working without some form of Okta authentication, whereas before we didn't require it. Why did the DSSO process change? When you say without some form of Okta authentication, you're getting, it sounds like you're saying you were getting prompted for an additional authenticator in addition to the agentless desktop single sign-on. If that's the case, it sounds like there probably was some discrepancy in how your policies were structured. Possibly you had a policy that was requiring 2 authenticators, like 2 factors as opposed to 1, and that might have been where that additional prompt was coming from. That's I'm speculating there, so I'd have to kind of take a look at the specific issue to tell you for certain, but that would be my first hunch. It sounds like there's probably something with the policy that was requiring a second authenticator. What about Okta OPP and SCIM? So for the Okta OPP, again, another one of our many acronyms, that's the on-premise provisioning. That's where you can create your own sort of custom provisioning integrations to on-premise applications. And SCIM is another way of doing those customized provisioning integrations. There's no impact there at all to those integrations. So if you have those custom integrations, those should be fine. what percentage of customers who use out-of-the-box sign-in widgets on top of normal implementations experience issues once upgrading to OIE? When you say out-of-the-box sign-in widgets, you're talking about, I'm assuming, embedded, where you're embedding the widget on a page that is hosted by the customer as opposed to hosted by Okta. I don't know. I don't have any actual statistics on percentages there as far as having issues after upgrading. That is one of the things. So there is a validator for that. So if we detect traffic coming from embedded widgets, that would be called out in your OIE upgrade hub as an acknowledgement item. And the call out there is just to make sure that any customer hosted code, whether it's a embedded widget or if you're using server side Okta APIs or SDKs, any sort of customized login page that you've developed and you're hosting, you should absolutely test that thoroughly in a non-prod environment before you upgrade. It may very well be that it works fine without any changes. That's definitely a possibility. But without knowing exactly what your implementation details are, we can't say that for certain. So you should absolutely test those. The one thing I would say about that is that, well, so let's start with the widget. With embedded widgets, there is a config option that after, I think it's version 7 and later of the widget, there's a config option called Use Classic Engine. And after version 7, that option defaults to false, which would mean that it's by default, the widget's going to try to operate in OIE mode. So if you're using version 7 of the widget currently and you're still on Classic, in order for it to function, you're already having to set that config option to for Use Classic Engine to true. And so when you upgrade, as long as you keep that config option set to true to Use Classic Engine, it's going to continue operating in classic mode. That will mean that it's very likely that you may not need to make any changes at all to your widget to keep that same level of functionality. Again, you should still test thoroughly, but as long as you keep that setting in place, the chances are good that you may not have to make any changes. However, you will be functioning in classic mode on that login screen, so you will not see any of the new OIE functionality as long as it's still running in classic mode. When you're ready to kind of move over to the OIE flows, you would change that config setting to false, and then it'll start operating in OIE mode. Now, you will have to make some changes there on the Okta side, so you'll want to go into the OIDC application that is tied to your embedded widget and make sure that it supports the interaction code flow. And you'll also want to go into the authorization server that your widget is pointing to and make sure that the access policies for that auth server also allow for interaction code flow grant type. But yeah, that was a long way of saying I don't really have any hard statistics on it, but you most likely will be okay, but you just need to make sure you test thoroughly in non-prod before you upgrade. Next question. Have any customers used a backup product such as Backupta to clone their classic tenant? I'm not familiar with Backupta. As far as kind of cloning, so to speak, the only utility that I'm really familiar with, with a number of customers using would be Terraform. So we have a lot of customers that will manage their Okta tenants using Terraform. Again, like I said, I'm not familiar with Backupta, but in theory, if it's using APIs, it in theory, I guess, could be configured to use the Okta APIs to kind of back up your data. It's really not critical, I would say, to do that. The more critical thing would be just testing your flows in preview. When you
What
do
he's saying,
upgrade,
I think what he's saying there, Brent, is
yeah.
is, and I have heard of customers do this before. I don't know about that product specifically, but to make sure that they have an exact replica or as close to it as possible in their preview org before they do the upgrade. I have heard of
Yes.
customers using products like that to essentially capture the configuration that is in their production and put that same configuration into preview.
Yeah, that can definitely help to kind of automate that process a bit. Let's see, going back to the end user experience changes, more explicitly, the last use MFA factor reset. So what that's referring to is there's no need for re-enrollment in any MFA factors. What that's talking about is when there's a setting in Okta where, like, let's say I've got both Okta Verify and Google Authenticator enrolled, but I always use Okta Verify. There's a setting where it just remembers that I've always used Okta Verify, and it just defaults to that and doesn't ask me which one I want to use. It just automatically defaults to Okta Verify. That setting gets reset as part of the upgrade. So the first time users log in after the upgrade, it's not going to default to, in that example, Okta Verify. It would show me a screen that has both Okta Verify and Google Authenticator, and I would click select next to the one that I want to use. At that point, it would set a new cookie and start remembering going forward.
Yeah.
Question on Terraform?
Connector.
Yes.
Yep.
Sorry, go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we do have a Terraform connector. I'm about to drop the link to some information on that into chat.
Yeah, it is important to note there are some changes to the Terraform connector between Classic and OIE as well, though. So if you have Terraform scripts in place for already for your Classic tenant, there may need to be some updates done to those after you upgrade to OIE. Just FYI. Let's see, where are we? Can you use Backup or Terraform to deploy to a developer org and say, as far as I know, there's no limitations there for developer orgs. I mean, the APIs are all still in place, so I don't see any reason why you shouldn't be able to use it to point to a developer org. The only thing you might see would be like rate limit differences, possibly, which may make it take a little longer potentially, but the APIs should all be available, so I don't see any reason why you couldn't. Charles, are you maybe it looks like you have a few follow-ups. Can I just unmute you, and maybe it might be easier to just ask your follow-ups? Does that work? There you go. You should be able to unmute now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, we've been trying to get the OIE upgrade off the ground this year, but we have a very large environment with many, many nuances, sign-on policies, app-level policies. Our day-to-day administrator left the company a little over a year ago. So some of the knowledge went with him on some of the configurations that we don't know about. So the idea that I can use Terraform and or backup to be able to at least be able to see what it is, that would be awesome, because we assumed we would only rely on Okta to restore our org if we ran into an issue after the upgrade. The two areas that we are struggling with is communications. I have approximately 10,000 people. And if they all, anytime we touch the Office 365 application, like if we need to resync it to get, the license updates because SKUs changed, it resets everybody's token. Anytime we seem to do anything with touching the application, it resets tokens. And of course, it's problematic, especially our VIPs who have multiple devices, and now they're frustrated why none of their systems work. And of course, there's always one or two of them that are not with them; they're at home or somewhere else, right? So that's been the one piece, is the communications and really outlining it. I've gone through the Okta worksheet. Thank you guys for putting that in Okta upgrade kit. Thank you guys for putting that together. We built our worksheets, but really kind of getting those screenshots. We're trying to do it from the developer org, which is already on OIE, so we can take what it kind of looks like. But we don't know what that behavior is from, okay, I'm logged in and
Upgrade.
I'm working.
Yeah.
What's going to pop up on the screen? What do we expect? And having 10,000 people and our VIPs called a service desk would be problematic. That's one, right? So how can we get any of the screenshots or any of the possible pop-ups that will come up and be able to document those and be able to send that out in a nice communication well in advance, and then keep reminding them this is what you might experience. That's one side of it. The second side of it then is the issues that were noticed with getting prompted for your MFAs or a secondary MFA or those. Is there a way around those? And what are those steps?
So as far as getting prompted for MFA, that would be a function of your policies. Specifically, it's likely coming from your app level policies. So if you have, as an example, if you have app level sign-on policies that require an additional MFA prompt today in Classic, one of the things you may see is for users who have an active session during the upgrade, while their session will persist, when they try to access those applications, even if they provided MFA when they originally logged in to the session, it may not have the necessary context in the cookie that they get exchanged the upgrade. So they may get a prompt there. But if you don't have those additional app level policy requirements today, those would not be magically put in place as part of the upgrade. Your policies are going to migrate over as they are. So if you don't have those requirements today, then that would not be an issue. As far as your question around the Microsoft specifically, I have not seen anything specific with that. I don't know, John. I think I heard you starting to chime in. I don't know if you've seen anything.
I would. So maybe just a little bit to answer a few of your questions. If you're modifying settings on your app and users are getting their tokens reset in Office 365 or Entra, whatever.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to see the config. There might be some things going on there that maybe we could just tweak something. I would suggest sign up for an office hours and we can review your specific 365 setup. But in regards to the upgrade, the actual upgrade is not going to reach out to Entra. It's not going to modify any federation settings. Any user that has a token, it's still valid. The refresh tokens are still valid. We don't revoke anything during the upgrade.
And signing up for office hours, it says sign up. That is just using the QR code right there.
Yep.
Is that right, Brent? Does that go
directly? Yeah, that'll take
hours?
You to the community sites, and there are links there to register for the office hour sessions. Yes.
Yeah, and we have a Okta internal TAM as well, so I can add them to that as well.
Yeah, you should be able to add extra people when you're setting up the invite, but drop a little note in there about what you wanted to review, and it will just remind us what your question was there when we see it.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you were saying the other one was on, so we have an interesting environment where we have users, a large portion of our users are not like, they don't, how do I explain it? Their login is not their first name, last name, right? Which is standard in our environment. We actually use their employee IDs. And so those are put into their profile as their secondary email. we don't let them change those. So what happens if they get prompted to add a secondary email? Because this says here the potential prompt for secondary email. We can't have that happen.
Yeah,
And
you're
the
talking
user
about
can't
the
change it.
extra prompt when they're blank. If they
Yeah.
can't edit them,
So
yeah,
should
there's
we pre-populate them with something else, or?
yeah, or you could just disable the altogether so that users can't see or edit them. If they don't need to see them, there should be no problems. You can still use the attribute, it just won't be marked as editable there.
Yeah, it's part of the default profile
Yeah.
for the users, so it's there. So yeah, that was the other one that was kind of a blocker for us is, and getting prompt for recovery factors. I'm sorry, what are recovery factors?
So this would be in Classic. There's kind of a distinction between like the factors that you can use to initiate a recovery flow versus the factors that you would use for MFA in authentication flows. So for example, like you might initiate a recovery flow via an email link or via an SMS or voice message with a code. Those like that email enrollment, so to speak, or SMS or voice enrollment for recovery purposes is a separate thing in Classic from the enrollments for those factor types for MFA. In Classic, though, that distinction goes away. Everything is just an authenticator, and everything is subject to the authentication or the authenticator enrollment policies, the factor enrollment policies. So it's possible if you don't have any type of enrollment, whether for like the old recovery setting in Classic or for an MFA factor, if you don't have anything for an email or SMS or voice, and those are the things you're allowing to initiate the self-service recovery flow, it's possible you might get prompted to enroll in one of those authenticators, even if you have other authenticators like Okta Verify or Google Authenticator, et cetera. And it's because those policies, the enrollment policies, are now looking at not just your MFA authenticators, but it's also taking into account those recovery flows. Now, that would not be an issue. That would only be an issue, number one, if you are allowing self-service password recovery or self-service unlock recovery flows. But even if you are, once you get to OIE, there are some additional options that you have. So in OIE, in addition to the phone factors and email factors to initiate that flow, you also can initiate recovery flows with Okta Verify push notifications and with Google Authenticator OTP. So if you know that you have, like if most of your users are using one of those two for MFA, then once you upgrade, if you enable those to initiate recovery flows, then you're going to greatly reduce the number of people who might potentially get prompted to enroll in a factor for recovery purposes.
Got it. Okay, because yeah, we actually a large portion of the users actually use security questions and SMS, and they're hourly employees, so we can't have them do that off hours, blah, blah, blah. So the possibility of them getting prompted for something that they don't have access to do, that would be problematic.
Yeah.
Okay. And we keep using the term recovery factor, but basically you're talking about password reset.
Yeah. Recovery is I forgot my password or I need to unlock my account if you allow that through self-service.
Yep.
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Actually, we have a custom widget that comes back on-prem that allows them to reset their password for quite a few of the on-prem applications at the same time.
Yeah, I definitely think you would benefit from the office hours. So that way you could show us your actual configuration. We can kind of like walk through that together with you. And then you don't have to kind of mask anything.
Yeah.
No. I actually like that because it's the first time that anybody's actually offered to take a look at what we have. We open up support cases and they say, well, yeah, this is fine, or this is okay. Or they come back and told us all the stuff that we needed to disable and all the flags in the background that we can't see, right? So we went through and got all of those turned off. We think, we don't know, because like I said, we can't see those. Those are flags that were turned on by support. So yeah, I'm definitely going to sign up with the office hours and have my team there to make sure that we go through this with the fine tooth comb, because it is very important. If I do, and once I do our preview environment, we have so much running through our preview environment that I have to do my production environment within like a week or two. I don't really have time to chase down a whole bunch of problems and issues. I need to be able to, kick it off, go test, make sure everything looks good, whatever little issues we have, and then set up to upgrade product. So, all right. Well, I appreciate your time, everybody's time today so much.
Yep. And I guess one more plug for the office hours. There was another question from someone else around some existing developer tenants. I guess that it sounds like they've probably been around for a while because they're still on Classic. And how can you get those upgraded, or is it just easier to request a new one? So if you have an existing developer tenant where you've got a lot of work done and you want to test upgrading that tenant to OIE rather than just signing up for a new one that would already be on OIE, I would suggest signing up for the office hours session, and then we can get the information about your tenant and enroll that tenant in the self-service upgrade tooling so that you can go through the actual upgrade process on your existing developer tenant. A lot of times if the developer tenants are not, if they don't get kind of linked to your kind of overall licensed company account, which a lot of times they don't, if you just sign up for it ad hoc, then they would not have gotten enrolled in the self-service upgrade tooling. But if you sign up for one of the office hour sessions, we can get the information about your tenant and get you enrolled in that so you can test it out. All right. We are coming up on time. We've got a couple, or well, I guess 1 minute left. Any last questions from anyone before we wrap up for today? Is there anything that I missed? All right. Not seeing anything new pop up. In that case, I'll take this last minute to thank everyone for attending. Again, a quick plug for next week. We do have another webinar next week. This one for next week will be a little different. It is going to be a fireside chat session with an Okta customer and early OIE early adopter to kind of talk about their experience with OIE, etc. So if you're interested in that, check out the community site here. There's a link on the community site to register for that webinar as well. That'll be next Thursday, same time, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. With that, thanks again, everyone, for joining. Dimitri, John, Andy, thanks as always for hopping on and providing the brains of the operation. And we will talk to you all again soon. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.